Let's venture into the spine-chilling world of creepypasta. Stories born in the shadowy corners of the internet, passed along from user to user, evolving, growing, and terrifying new audiences with each click. But why do we crave these tales? What is it about monsters, dark creatures, and the macabre that attracts us so deeply? And how did creepypasta become such a global phenomenon, giving birth to some of the most infamous characters in modern horror? Let's explore the twisted history, progression, and allure of creepypasta. But first, I'll share a creepypasta story of my own. I'm Vanessa K. Eccles, and this is Fabled. Lottie's footsteps echoed against the silent backdrop of the night, a staccato rhythm that seemed too loud in the hush. The street lamps flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on the path ahead. Jake, her loyal golden retriever, trotted beside her, his leash slack in Lottie's trembling hand. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss tonight, an unsettling whisper in the wind, the way shadows seemed to contort and dance just beyond the reach of light. "Come on, Jake," she murmured, urging her feet to move faster, though the dog seemed unperturbed by the creeping unease that had settled in her bones. The empty park they crossed nightly now felt like a gaping mouth, ready to swallow them whole, and every rustle in the bushes sent her heart into overdrive. Enough, she chided herself. This is what happens when you binge-watch horror movies on a Friday evening. Still, the dread clung to her like a second skin. "Okay, think of something else," Lottie murmured under her breath, reaching into her pocket for her phone. Her fingers fumbled with the device, a lifeline, as she scrolled through her contacts. She needed another voice, a human connection to dispel this growing sense of solitude. She called Sarah. The familiar dialing tone filled her ears, a comforting sound amidst the quiet. Jake glanced at her with his warm, brown eyes, sensing the change in her demeanor. As the phone rang, Lottie found herself unconsciously picking up the pace, each step taking them closer to the safety of their apartment. "Hey Sarah, it's me." Lottie spoke quickly when her friend answered, her voice tinged with forced cheerfulness. "Yeah, I'm just out with Jake. No, nothing's wrong, just, would you mind talking to me until we get home?" Lottie listened to Sarah's soothing voice on the other end, a balm to her frayed nerves. As they continued their nightly journey, the feeling of being watched still lurking in the periphery. Lottie's fingers tightened around Jake's leash as a rustling sound emerged from the dense thicket lining the trail. Her pulse quickened, and she could barely swallow past the knot in her throat. A shadow detached itself from the darkness between the trees, a shape too misaligned with nature to be any benign creature of the woods. It moved with an eerie grace, hunched and deliberate, pausing at the edge of the path as if it sensed their presence. The creature was a hulking mass, its outline jagged against the dim glow of the distant street lamps. Lottie's breath came in short gasps, each exhale visible in the cold night air as she strained her eyes to discern more details. But it was the way the creature seemed to absorb the scant light around it, as if cloaked in a shroud of shadows that sent a chill down her spine. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The dog, who had initially perked up, his ears twitching toward the sound, now stood rigid by her side. His demeanor shifted, curiosity dissolving into raw, animal instinct. Jake's fur bristled along his spine, and he let out a low, uncertain whine. He cowered, tucking his tail beneath him, his whole body starting to quiver. "Shh, boy," Lottie soothed, though her attempt at calm faltered against the pounding in her chest. She watched Jake press close to her leg, felt his shaking through the fabric of her jeans. His whimpering grew louder, a mournful sound that made her skin crawl. She tried to still her own trembling as the creature's form became clearer, towering over them with a quiet menace. Its limbs were elongated, too long for any natural being, twisted branches of flesh that bent at odd angles. There was a heaviness to the air around it, a pressure that seemed to push against her senses. "Easy, Jake, easy," she murmured, even as her own fear mirrored his. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to take Jake and run until the oppressive feeling of dread no longer clawed at her back. But her legs felt rooted to the spot, her gaze locked on the dark figure that now seemed to command the night itself. As Jake continued to shake beside her, the creature took a lumbering step forward, and Lottie knew they couldn't linger any longer. The need for flight overpowered her paralysis, and she drew in a ragged breath, preparing to make a decision that might seal their fates under the watchful eyes of whatever haunted the darkness before them. Sarah had been rambling on about her day, but suddenly realized something must be happening. "Hey, Lottie, everything okay?" "Sarah, there's something out here," Lottie whispered, her voice quivering like the leaves around her. She kept her eyes fixed on the massive shape, its presence an insult to the natural world. "It's huge, Sarah. It has this elongated nose, almost like a snout, but twisted, wrong somehow." "Twisted how?" Sarah's voice was steady, a contrast to the chaos unfolding before Lottie. "Like it's been pulled too far from its face, stretched thin, and its eyes. God, they're glowing, a sickly yellow that doesn't seem real." Lottie could feel the thud of her heartbeat against her ribs, an erratic drumming that matched Jake's whimpers. "Okay, listen to me," Sarah said, urgency bleeding in her tone. "You need to run. Now, Lottie, get out of there." "But what if it follows us?" Lottie's gaze darted back and forth between the path ahead and the creature behind. "Then you keep running. Don't look back. Just go." Sarah's command sliced through the fog of Lottie's fear, igniting a spark of survival within her. Nodding, though Sarah couldn't see, Lottie pulled Jake's leash tight and they bolted. Her breath came in ragged puffs, and the darkness seemed to stretch out endlessly before her. Behind, the creature loomed, a mystery of shadows and dread. "Are you moving? Talk to me," Sarah's voice buzzed in her ear. "Running," Lottie managed to choke out between breaths, the words barely forming as she sprinted. Every few steps, she risked a glance over her shoulder, expecting to see those glowing eyes tracking her every move. Each time the path behind her was empty. Each time relief surged, only to be snatched away by the persistent echo of her own pounding footsteps. "Good, just keep going. Tell me when you're safe," Sarah insisted, her presence a beacon of calm in the sea of panic that threatened to drown Lottie. "Okay," Lottie panted, the words barely a whisper as she pushed herself onward. Propelled by pure fear, she pushed the heavy doors of her apartment building hard and felt a tinge of relief. But the lights in the building's hallways sputtered like a dying heartbeat, casting erratic shadows that danced along the walls. Lottie's breaths came out in white puffs visible in the cold air that seemed to have followed her from the outside world. She stroked Jake's head. "Almost there," she murmured, more to herself than to Sarah, who was still on the line, a lifeline in the darkness. The dim illumination of the emergency lights painted the corridor in an otherworldly glow, turning the familiar into something alien. "Talk to me, Lottie. What's happening now?" Sarah's voice cackled with static, yet her worry was the clearest thing Lottie could cling to. "I'm in my building, but the lights, they're flickering. It's like it's watching me." Her words tumbled out, punctuated by the staccato rhythm of the faulty fluorescence overhead. You think it followed you home?" There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. You can't mean... Shh, wait, Lottie interrupted, her heart slamming against her ribcage. In the corner of her vision, a shape loomed larger than life. Its form, undulating with the whims of light and shadow, its elongated nose seemed to sniff the air, and for a split second, 2 glowing orbs locked onto hers. Sarah, it's here. Run, Lottie, get to your door. But even as the word run ignited her muscles, the corridor buzzed back to life, bathing everything in harsh fluorescence. The creature was gone, vanished as if it had been nothing more than a trick of the mind, a specter birthed from fear and the half-light. God, it disappeared. Lottie's voice wavered, a tumultuous sound that betrayed her rattled nerves. The lights came on and it's gone. Okay, breathe, Lottie. It's just the adrenaline, okay? Your mind is making you see things, playing tricks. You're safe inside. Nothing's going to get you there. Sarah's words were meant to comfort, but they fell flat against the backdrop of Lottie's raw terror. Yeah, maybe, Lottie replied, though the seed of doubt rooted itself deep within her. The logical part of her brain screamed that monsters aren't real, and yet the primal, instinctual part whispered of unseen horrors lurking just beyond perception. With shaking hands, she fumbled for her keys, gripping them like a charm as she sidestepped toward the apartment door. Keep talking to me all the way inside. Lock the door behind you, Sarah instructed, her voice a steady drumbeat guiding Lottie through the haze of her own frantic thoughts. Okay, Lottie echoed, her fingers finally finding the keyhole. She slipped inside, her sanctuary, leaving the flickering lights in the ghostly corridors, and hopefully the creature behind. The deadbolt clicked into place with a finality that echoed off the walls of Lottie's apartment, a small fortress against the night's terrors. She leaned back against the door, the cool wood pressing into her clammy skin, providing a stark contrast to the sweat that chilled her spine. Jake, her loyal companion, paced restlessly, a whine caught in his throat, his senses still attuned to the darkness they'd fled. Sarah, Lottie said, her voice steadier now that she was wrapped in the familiar shroud of home. I'm in. Locked up tight. Good. You're okay now, Lottie. Sarah's voice cracked with static through the phone, a lifeline that spanned the distance between safety and unknown dread. Am I, though? Lottie mumbled more to herself than to Sarah, her gaze drifting to the windows where shadows danced, partners to the soft whisper of trees outside. It felt like madness, this need to look over her shoulder, questioning her own mind. Have I ever told you about my grandma's stories about the old country? The ones about creatures that take you? Take you? Sarah repeated, her skepticism an audible eyebrow raise. Yeah, she used to tell my cousins and I these legends when we were kids. There was one monster. She said it could steal a woman's body, wear it like a second skin, leaving nothing behind but a husk. Lottie's fingers traced the pattern on her armchair, tracing circles as if to ward off the evil eye. She always said fear would draw them, like sharks to blood. Whoa, dark much? Your grandma was quite the storyteller, Sarah said, trying to inject levity into the conversation. But that's all they are, Lottie, stories. Everyone grew up, remember? Learned there's no boogeyman waiting in the closet or under the bed. Sure, we learned, Lottie replied, but her heart hammered a different truth. She looked down at Jake, who finally settled at her feet, his head on his paws but his eyes wary. But what if some stories are born from something real? What if they're warnings? Listen to yourself, Lot. This isn't some fairy tale. This is you working too many long hours, getting spooked on a late-night walk. Your grandma's tales were just that. Tales to keep you out of trouble. Trouble? Lottie echoed, a hollow laugh escaping her. The feeling of being watched hadn't dissipated with the locking of the door or the turning on of lights. It clung to her like cobwebs, threads of unease that she couldn't just swipe away. "Hey, get some rest, yeah?" Sarah's voice softened, a distant hand trying to comfort. "Tomorrow you'll see things differently. It's just been a long night." "Yeah, maybe," Lottie conceded, though the words felt like stones in her mouth. She knew sleep would be a fickle fiend, elusive as the wisp of a creature that may or may not have been trailing her moments ago. "Call me in the morning," Sarah said, a promise to be there even when the line went dead. "Okay, talk to you then," Lottie whispered, ending the call. She turned off the lights one by one, cocooning herself in the dark, wondering if the monsters of old were truly just figments of imagination, or if they lurked hungry and patient, just beyond the veil of reality. She curled into bed and turned on the television. It flickered to life, casting dancing shadows that only served to heighten her unease. With each passing moment, the screen's droning became a distant hum, like the buzzing of bees locked outside her window. Lottie's eyelids grew heavy, burdened not by the promise of sleep, but by the weight of her own racing thoughts. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind against the pane, seemed to whisper secrets in a language made of fears. Her breath became slow and deliberate, an attempt to mimic the rhythm of sleep, but her heart beat out an urgent counterpoint, unwilling to be lulled. Jake, sensing her distress, pressed closer, his warmth a tangible reminder that not all was lost to shadow. Yet even as her eyes finally closed, surrendering to the pull of exhaustion, Lottie's mind refused to quiet. In the nooks and crannies of her consciousness, the creature from the trail lurked, its elongated nose and glowing eyes imprinted on the inside of her lids. "It's just my imagination," she told the darkness, but the words sounded hollow, a flimsy shield against the unknown. Her last coherent thought before drifting into a fitful slumber was a question, one that carried the weight of ancient warnings. What if the monsters are more than just stories? Morning light spilled timidly through the slats of Lottie's blinds, a stark contrast to the ominous darkness that had cradled her fitful sleep. Yet where there should have been the soft chirping of birds or the distant murmur of the city waking up, there was only an unnerving hush. Miles away, Sarah tried calling Lottie, a frown creasing her forehead when the call went straight to voicemail once again. "Lottie, come on," unease knotting in her gut. It wasn't like her friend to miss their morning check-in, especially after last night's unsettling events. The clock on the wall ticked in a slow, monotonous beat, marking time as Sarah chewed on her lip, wrestling with concern. In the end, her worry overcame hesitation. Grabbing her keys and jacket, she left her untouched coffee on the counter and headed out the door. The corridor leading to Lottie's apartment felt claustrophobically narrow as Sarah approached, her footsteps echoing too loudly against the linoleum. When she reached the familiar door, marked 3B, the sound of scratching greeted her ears. It was urgent, insistent. Jake was pawing at the door from the inside. "Hey boy, it's just me," Sarah called softly through the wood, hoping her voice would soothe the dog's evident distress. There was no answering bark, no jingle of a collar, just the scratch, scratch, scratch of claws against the door. "Something's not right," she whispered to herself, fumbling with her set of spare keys. Her fingers felt thick and clumsy as she finally managed to slot the key into the lock and turn it. The door swung open with a low creak, and Jake's form was revealed in the dimness, his eyes wide and tail tucked between his legs. He didn't leap forward in his usual greeting, Instead, he glanced back towards the bedroom, whining softly. "Where's Lottie, boy?" Sarah's voice was barely audible, her heart thudding with a mix of fear and deja vu. The apartment was still, the air heavy with the silence that seemed to swallow her words. Something primal within her recoiled at the thought of stepping inside, a visceral echo of the tales Lottie had recounted over the phone just hours ago. It was just a figment of her imagination, she tried to reassure herself, echoing Lottie's hollow mantra. But as she stood there, on the threshold of the unknown, Sarah couldn't help but feel the icy tendrils of doubt creeping into her soul. Was it truly just imagination? Or had the shadows listened a little too closely to the whispers of old fears? Sarah's tentative steps echoed through the stillness as she followed Jake, his nails clicking against the hardwood floor, with an urgency that made her pulse race. The dog paused at Lottie's bedroom door, sniffing the air with a whimper. Sarah's hand trembled on the doorknob. It was cold, colder than it should be, like the chill of forgotten dreams. Okay, she muttered to herself, a feeble attempt to summon bravery from the marrow of her bones. She pushed the door open, and the light from the hallway spilled into the room, casting long shadows that danced eerily against the walls. "Dear God," the words escaped her in a gasp. There, amidst the familiar chaos of Lottie's creative sanctuary, sketchbooks strewn across the floor, paint tubes squeezed into twisted shapes, lay something utterly foreign. It was skin, large, translucent patches of it, shimmering slightly as if still holding on to life. The shedding was scattered across the carpet, leading towards the window that now stood ajar, an uninvited breeze playing with the curtains. For a moment, Sarah forgot to breathe, her mind incapable of piecing together the scene before her. "Sis?" Her thought trailed off into silence. She couldn't finish it, couldn't allow the terrifying possibilities to take form, not even in her head. Was this the work of the creature from the folklore that haunted Lottie's childhood? Or was it something even more unthinkable? In the corner of the room, Jake began to whine, cowering as if he recalled whatever had happened here. Sarah's gaze was drawn to the empty bed, the sheets ruffled but cold, no sign of her friend, save for the eerie shedding of skin that seemed to mock her with its very existence. "Where are you, Lottie?" she whispered into the void, hoping for an answer she knew wouldn't come. Her eyes flitted back to the grotesque evidence, her mind racing with questions. Was Lottie taken? Or had she become the very thing she feared? The air felt thicker now, charged with the residue of something unspeakable. Sarah backed away, her heart thudding with a mix of fear and the realization that some stories, some warnings, might weave themselves into the fabric of reality in ways no one dared to believe. "Monsters aren't supposed to be real," she said to the empty room, her voice a mere echo in the aftermath of an incomprehensible truth. As she stepped out, she left behind the bedroom, a scene of mystery and horror. Whatever had happened to Lottie ended with more questions than answers. The term creepypasta is derived from copypasta, a blend of the words copy and paste. In the early days of the internet, stories, memes, and urban legends were often copied and pasted across forums, email chains, and message boards. By the mid-2000s, these online campfire stories took on a life of their own with the rise of creepypasta. These stories were short, easily shareable, and most importantly, deeply unsettling. They usually featured unnerving themes like encounters with the supernatural, mysterious creatures, or inexplicable events, and they often came with warnings or instructions. The goal? To unsettle, to cause fear, and to leave readers glancing over their shoulders in the dark. One of the first and most famous creepypasta characters was Slender Man, created in 2009 by a man who went by Victor Surge online. Slender Man is a tall, faceless creature with unnaturally long limbs who abducts children and lurks in the periphery of photographs. He became a central figure in countless fan-made stories, images, and even tragic real-life events. Another key figure in the creepypasta realm is Jeff the Killer. The story of Jeff tells of a young boy who becomes a killer after a brutal bullying incident leaves him permanently disfigured. The iconic image of Jeff's pale, wide-eyed face with a sinister smile still haunts many who first saw it on creepypasta forums. And who can forget Ben Drowned, the story of a haunted Legend of Zelda game cartridge, terrified gamers with its cursed save files and mysterious glitches, adding an interactive element to the horror. These stories were passed around on forums, on Reddit and 4chan, and dedicated creepypasta websites. Each retelling added new details, expanded the myth, and made these tales even creepier. So what is it about creepypasta, or horror in general, that captivates us? Why are we so drawn to these unsettling, sometimes downright terrifying tales? Psychologically speaking, fear is a powerful emotion. It triggers our primal survival instincts, sharpens our senses, and raises our awareness. When we engage with horror stories, we confront fear in a controlled environment. It's a thrill, a rush, but without the actual danger. Monsters and dark creatures like those in creepypasta often embody our deepest anxieties. They represent the unknown, the chaotic, and the dangerous. But there's also a fascination with these creatures because they exist outside the ordinary. They challenge the natural order, forcing us to question what we know about the world. Many of these stories, like Slender Man, also rely on the fear of being watched or stalked. It's a universal fear, the idea that someone or something is lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. At the same time, creepypasta's collaborative, viral nature means that these stories can evolve. Readers can participate, adding their own twists or retellings, turning these urban legends into living, breathing things. There's also a certain appeal to the anonymity of the internet. Unlike traditional horror, where an author's name is often attached to the story, many creepypasta stories spread without a clear origin. This gives them a sense of authenticity, like they could have happened to anyone, even you. Creepypasta's influence on modern culture can't be overstated. From film adaptations and video games to real-life events like the tragic Slender Man stabbing case, these stories have transcended the digital realm and impacted the real world. The dark side of creepypasta lies in how its fictional stories can blur the line between fantasy and reality, especially for vulnerable individuals like children or teenagers, where some have mistaken these characters to be real. This tragedy underscores the potential psychological impact that these stories can have on impressionable minds, leading to dangerous behaviors. While most people recognize these things as fiction, the potential for real-life consequences, especially when these tales are taken seriously, serves as a warning about the power of online content to influence behavior and thought. But beyond the tragedies, creepypasta has fostered a new kind of storytelling. It brought back the tradition of oral storytelling, only this time it's digital. viral, and often anonymous. In doing so, it created a community of people who love to scare and be scared. Though creepypasta may appear to some as fading out, I don't think we'll ever stop telling spooky stories, creating new monsters, or trying to scare each other. There's something alluring about the darkness and the creatures that lurk within. Fabled is produced by me, Vanessa K. Eccles, with music by Katie Coffrin. Until next time, thank you for listening.